Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 44, The Power of the Mustard Seed, with our guest via Skype, Fred-Allen Self. Hey, Fred-Allen, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Oh, thank you.
So, for those people who don't know you, would you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
My name is Fred Allen. I'm a minister with the Progressive Christian Alliance. I also work in a local church here. I'm the worship leader there. My husband and I are both members at the church. And the biggest thing I do, actually, aside from my work in the church, is I'm very heavily involved with a local theater troupe. It's called Proud Theater. They're a group it's a youth theater troupe it's empowerment for LGBTQ, the rest of the letters, LGBTQ youth who don't have a voice. This theater troupe gives them a voice. They create their own expressions through art. It's a art advocacy and art advocacy and I can't think of the word at the moment, but they're a group that just really gives these kids voices, and it's very powerful. I'm one of the mentors. I'm the faith mentor, actually. It's a very pluralistic faith group, which is awesome. And I also do all of the set and lighting design for them. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, and I also my husband and I, we have 3 beautiful daughters that we take care of, and they keep me very busy when I'm not doing church and theater things.
Right. So what made you get into ministry in the first place and into LGBT youth ministry in particular?
What got me in ministry, it's an interesting question because it's something I've thought about before, and I'm not really sure what got me into ministry. It's something I've just been doing for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's something that I think kind of naturally started to do because of my own personality. I'm a person that I just care about other people, and I have always cared about other people. And I guess I've always been a person that I've never understood this idea that, well, we need to care about these people and not these other people. And so that's me. I care for those who honestly a lot of times seem to be forgotten and left off and dropped off of society. Mm-hmm. So I've just been doing that most of my life. And I guess I realized at one point I was doing the 9-to-5 work thing and realizing I felt it was very soul crushing for me and realizing it was killing me inside. And I just honestly just kind of quit and started taking care of people, started doing things, and it has opened up so many avenues that I never would have even thought of before. And as far as LGBT youth ministry, that was a more intentional thing. It was actually about 5 years ago I came out myself. I grew up very, very, very fundamentalist Christian in thought, where about the worst thing you could possibly be was gay. And I grew up with these just truly horribly soul-crushing narratives that taught me to just loathe a part of myself and to fear God's wrath over who I was. I grew up in that, and it led me to do some things that I would never have done otherwise. Like I got married right out of high school to a woman to fix myself, and that led to a whole series of nightmares for both of us and our families. And I eventually came to that point where I came out and I realized, that it really is okay to be who I am. And that this is not, loving another person is not an evil thing. And that period was really a deconstructing period of my own theology, my own faith, and figuring out what do I believe, what don't I believe. And I came to this point where I realized I needed a voice when I was a teenager to tell me I'm okay. I needed someone, not just outside the church, but even inside the church and in the faith, to tell me, you know what, you are okay. And I realized I can be that person for some kids. I don't see myself as like a huge hero or anything swooping in and saving them. But if I can be that one voice that a kid hears that says, you know what, love you. You are wonderful and loved and created beautifully as you are. Because if I had one person tell me that as a kid, my life would have turned out very, very differently. And so that was a very intentional thing, getting involved with that. And I am very heavily involved in the theater because that's what my undergraduate degree is. And someone said, you know what, hey, there's this theater troupe over here and they're looking for some tech people. You should go talk to them. That was about 4 years ago. And I've been heavily involved ever since. And I'm actually one of the few staff members of the theater, and I love it.
Well, I think people underestimate, how one voice and one person emulating that things can be okay and that, being who you are is not horrible. people really underestimate how much that can help people and how much that can save lives. I mean, really, literally save a life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. Actually, when I first came out, the backlash with my friends and family was pretty horrible, actually, because, like I said, I came from that very fundamentalist background. And I'll be honest, on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, I lashed out a lot. I was very angry. I was very scared. And rather than seeing someone who's angry, hurt, and scared, they saw someone in need of, being scared out of hell. And so said horrible things to me. And it really legitimately, I got to the point of almost suicide. One day I was driving and I literally almost drove myself off of a bridge. And it kind of terrified me, actually, because I'd never gotten to that point before. And there was a church nearby, an Episcopal church, that I knew nothing about this church or the minister, but I looked him up on the email. And I just emailed the minister and said, I need someone to talk to. Here's the situation. Can we talk? She actually called me right away and said, yes, come meet me at the church. I went and met her at the church. And she told me something that, looking now, I can't believe this was a huge revelation, but it was literally something I'd never heard before. She said, you know what? God, the creator, however you want to frame the divine being, she said, created you, loves you just as you are. And that was just kind of a, oh my God moment.
Really? Yeah.
Because I had literally never heard that before in those words. And she said it with such a passion that I couldn't help but believe her. Mm-hmm. And I credit her to this day for saving my life. Because she taught me that, you're worth more than driving off a bridge. So, yeah, it is amazing how much that one thing from that one person can dramatically alter your life.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to really see that message in our culture? Because, there are a lot of really progressive churches and people and Christians and pagans and, people of all stripes, yet that message seems to get really lost.
It does get really lost. And I've actually thought about that myself. Part of it, I think, is that negative voice, that negative message is so loud. I'm not sure that it's really the prominent message. I'm not even sure it's the majority message, but it is loud. And I guess I've realized in my own life that, those people who are very anti-gay and very, very negative and very angry type people tend to be louder, talk more, and talk longer than others. And I find that the message of compassion, the message of love, the message of, you are beautiful as you are, tends to be a much quieter message. I don't think it's because they're ashamed of the message, but it's something that they don't need to shout over and over and over and over. Because really it takes being touched that one time to change everything. Whereas I guess when you have that angry message, you just feel like you need to keep shouting it and keep shouting it and keep shouting it. And maybe if you can drown out those other voices, they'll go away.
Right.
And I think that sometimes, unfortunately, I think they do a really good job of drowning out the other voices.
Yeah.
Because it's not that the other voices aren't there. I mean, I was shocked to discover after this minister said this to me, she introduced me to a whole new world of Christian religion, just religious thought in general. And I realized that there are people of faith of all stripes, like you said, and there's people with no faith. There's all kinds of people that have this message of hope and love. I just never heard them before because these other voices were so up in the forefront of my world. And I also think part of it might be my own self. I had heard this message, this negative message, so many times in my life and so much. I think I might have actually been legitimately scared to listen to the other message. Because I guess when you hear one narrative for so long and hear one quote unquote truth for so long, it becomes just that to you, truth. And it's a little scary to listen to any other narrative, even if it might be a freeing one. Does that make any kind of sense? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, my bishop at my church, she talks a lot about that and how, using the Bible as a blunt instrument is abusive. It's sanctioned abuse. and saying that it's abuse sanctioned by God. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that, these loud voices, because and also, let's admit, they have money.
Yes, right? That's true.
But these voices are allowed to be abusive on a large scale.
And I think that you just said something very key about that, is that it's sanctioned by God. Because I grew up with this message that it wasn't just these people disapproving of me. It was God approving of this part of me. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a world that, I'm not sure, I don't know about your background here, but I grew up in a world that God was a tyrant. God was honestly a fairly horrific being, because it was the God I grew up with was the God of, you're going to do it my way. And I'm not really going to tell you my way. You kind of have to figure out my way. And if you don't figure out my way, I'm throwing you into eternal torment. Good luck. That's kind of the God I grew up with. And when you're hearing that God, the one who literally controls whether your eternity is going to be horrific pain and judgment or eternal bliss and happiness, when you hear that God hates you, it's a little terrifying when that's your only lens to view the world from.
And it's I think it's doubly dangerous and doubly destructive, because it's at the spirit level. Because that's such an ingrained part of yourself. It's such an emotional part of yourself that, it's kind of like, when people see really intelligent people that are in abusive relationships, right? They wonder why are you in that abusive relationship? Aren't you smart enough to know that this is wrong? And it's like, but there's an emotional aspect to it too. Emotional and spiritual aspect. And I think that's part of the problem with that kind of theology.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I'm realizing that there's people that don't even necessarily believe in that theology that still manage to get anchored down by it. And honestly, myself, I think towards the end, I didn't believe in it at all, but yet I still was dragging this around with me for some reason. And it's one of those things I've tried to unpack and figure out why. I'm not really entirely sure. It just because such a big part of, not part of who you are, but just a big, almost like anchor around your neck that you can't seem to lift off.
Well, I tend to think that, it's because you grew up with it. If there's something you learn as a kid, it's really hard. It's much harder to shake off, rather than learning it as an adult.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, the biggest thing it did for me, and it's interesting, you ask about those voices and why the message of hope gets drowned out and stuff. Another piece I've realized is that I think that part of what makes this message get out so much is that I've realized a lot of times that the message, or the anti-gay message, or the hateful message, isn't coming from hateful people or in a hateful place. And a lot of times it comes from well-meaning people who legitimately may actually love you and who legitimately think they're telling you what you need to hear. And so you get kind of this double whammy of this really horrible, hateful message, but coming from someone that loves you and wants the best for you. And it's a little bit of a confusing thing to tear apart. Because I realize my own family, the ones who are very virulently anti-gay to me and that ultimately almost drove me to suicide, would never have in a million years intended to do that to me.
Right.
And I don't question the fact that when they say I love you, that they really do mean that. But in their worldview, what they're doing is somehow what God wants them to be doing. It's somehow in their narrative a loving thing to be doing. And I think that that's part of the reason that message gets out there so big too, because the people who are putting that message out there typically fervently believe it and really feel like this is a mission from God. I've got to get this message out.
Right.
And that drives them to do it in ways that they may not do otherwise. There's voices of tolerance and love that feel that same drive, but I'm not sure that there's this drive to shout from a bullhorn to where everybody on earth hears me. And, it's more in the personal relationships and one-on-one conversations that message seems to be spread, which I think might be the most effective way to spread it, honestly.
Well, I mean, it's a lot more, but doing by example, right? I mean,
yes.
You are out there in the world being what you want others to be and treating people how you want to be treated. Oh, gee, funny that.
Seem to remember certain guy, saying that to disciples.
Yeah, gee, I think there's a book on that.
maybe, just maybe, that is a couple thousand years old.
Well, there's a lot of the kind of, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it, a fundamentalist attitude. And it shows up in a lot of places, I've also seen it in the pagan community where there's like that similar kind of, my way is the right way and your way is dumb,
Yes.
And, if you don't believe in the way I'm doing something, then you're doing it wrong or you're a horrible person or et cetera, et cetera. Interesting.
Huh. You said you've seen that in the pagan community too?
Absolutely. In fact, I've seen a few people that are virulently anti-Christian and are, when they talk about Christianity, talk very similarly in the same style, same kind of rhetoric as the most fundamentalist of Christians.
Interesting. I guess I had no idea that was even a thing.
Well, I've seen it in a lot of different groups, and every religion has their people that push that agenda.
I can see that. I guess I can definitely see that. I'm growing up where I grew up in. I don't know if I told you. I grew up in the deep South. I grew up in southern Arkansas. So I mean, the one unfortunate part of that is I grew up in a world that was almost exclusively very conservative Christian. And so it was actually a revelation to me moving out of Arkansas. I live in Wisconsin now. It was a revelation to me being exposed to not only radically different versions of Christianity, but completely different faiths. It's like I knew on a theoretical level that other faiths existed, but actually coming into contact with other faiths was almost like a earth-shattering thing for me, and then realizing that the narrative I'd always been told about these other faiths wasn't true, because here's amazing people that believe dramatically different things than I do, and you know what? I like them, and they're fantastic. And coming to that realization that other faiths aren't the horrible, evil things I've been taught they are.
Right.
And learning that other faiths can even be compatible with my faiths in some ways. It's kind of amazing. Actually, that's something the Progressive Christian Alliance has been huge for helping me learn more of and engage more in, and it's been fantastic and fascinating. I love it.
Well, and and I find it very satisfying to be someone who is Wiccan Christian and being a part of the education of people and doing that. And it's really fascinating because people tend to think it's either Christianity or not. You know what I mean? Yes. And like you said, you grew up in an area that was very much like you're either Christian or you're not. And, if you're not Christian, why?
Exactly. And if you're not Christian, it's not only you're either Christian or not, but it really was a dichotomy of you're a good person or you're not. And part of being a good person was being a Christian. Right. And if you weren't a Christian, then you were obviously not a good person. So it was really, like I said, a revelation to, it shouldn't be. I look at this point and feel kind of ashamed of myself that it was, but it was kind of this revelation that, wow, there's amazing people, not just good people, that aren't Christians. And I mean, I'll be honest, when I first connected with you and your This Week in Heresy and your blog, it was the first time I'd ever come in contact with someone who was Wiccan and Christian. And it was amazing to me because there was a point in my life where I'd have been horrified and repulsed at the idea and just shocked. And I was amazed. I was very fascinated by it. And I loved it, in fact. And the more I listened, the more I learned, the more I think it's an amazing thing. And I wish more people could open themselves up to experiences different than their own. Because it's amazing what you will learn that way. Right. It's amazing the things you can learn and the ways you can grow that you never even knew you needed to grow. Right. Absolutely. Are you finding that
the younger generations, because you're working with kids and everything, are you finding that they're way more open about other people, other beliefs, other sexualities, other stuff? Like they're more open to the other?
It's interesting, actually. I think the answer to that is yes and no. Working with the youth I work with, like I said, it's an LGBTQ theater group. These kids are far more open than the average, I think, just because of their life experiences. But I work with kids both in my church and in the theater group. And I've realized that, yes, in many ways, they are more open to new experiences. And they don't seem to be nearly as threatened by things other than themselves. But I've also noticed that seems to be within a certain bounds. There still seems to be a boundary that is a uncomfortable boundary for them to cross. But I think it really depends on from person to person where that boundary is. But as a rule, I think that boundary is far more out there than previous generations have been, if that makes sense. So like they've got a wider range that it is comfortable before they get to that boundary. Like interestingly, my the kids at the theater, we had a conversation about religion at one point, and it was amazing to me the fact that it wasn't shocking to them that here I am, an openly gay man who is a minister who has children. When I talk to other adults, there's almost always that moment of, now, wait a minute, back up the bus. What?
Right.
Because not only is it the openly gay with children, it's the openly gay with ministers, that they want to know how do all these pieces work, because these aren't compatible things, at least in their mind. And it amazed me with the kids when I talked to them, there wasn't even a moment that any of them thought any of these pieces should be incompatible. It was just kind of like, okay, and roll with it. Their question was actually much more, why are you a Christian minister if you're gay? Not because they felt like it was incompatible, but because they said most of your religion hates you. And I was a little taken aback at the question, and I realized that they had only ever actually been exposed to one version of Christian thought. So it was kind of an educating moment, and it was amazing to me. I realized that they were more open to hear what I had to say too, than a lot of adults would be. Sorry, my cat's back there.
Oh, that's okay. My cats do the same thing.
Making yourself known. Yeah. So I think that young people are more open. And even the other thing I've noticed is this younger generation, even when it is the area that they are uncomfortable, I've noticed that their reaction to it is different. Their reaction, by and large, I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say everyone's this way, but the kids I encounter, by and large, when they do get into that uncomfortable area, they still seem to be willing to engage and willing to go there to an extent, if that makes sense, and learn. They don't just completely shut down. Whereas in my experience with my own generation, I know that a lot of my own generation, when we get into a place that's an uncomfortable and other space and encounter people who are other, the tendency is to just, nope, we're done.
Done. Yeah. Let's not talk about it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I've noticed they seem to be a lot more open, albeit maybe reluctantly, but okay, I'll go there with you a little bit. So I think that's a positive step, I think.
Do you think the internet has something to do with that? Because, they're able to go ahead and research without having to worry about repercussions of saying, well, you shouldn't do that. That kind of thing.
I'll be honest, I've never even thought about that. But now that you mention it, probably so. I mean, speaking from my own experience, I know that my faith journey and faith world in general started to change when I had internet at home, because I had only one narrative, but then the internet gave me the opportunity to start searching and realizing there are other narratives out there. And not only are there other narratives out there, there's a lot of well thought out, well reasoned, well put together faiths that are radically different than what I've ever heard, and people that have no faith, and others that are wonderful and have wonderful things to say. And I think now that you mention that probably is true, because as a teenager, I mean, the internet existed, If you count AOL dial-up, it takes, an
Right.
hour to load a picture.
Right.
I legitimately remember, loading a picture and going and making lunch while the picture was loading.
Right.
And you can't get a phone call while this is happening.
Mhm.
So that was my internet. And that didn't even exist until I was in, middle school. So yeah, I guess that's true. These kids have a whole world of information that didn't exist for me growing up at all. So I think that may have a large part of it, because not just at their computers, but at their fingertips on phones or tablets,
Mhm.
you can find perspectives on things in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I know there's some pastors out there who would probably disagree with me, but I actually really love people having their phones in church, because if there's something that they don't understand, they can look it up right away.
Yes.
And, or they can share information, share a message right away. Like, I've never, at my church, that, they've never really yelled at anybody for having their Twitter or their iPad, their iPad or their phone out, or even Twittering or posting on Facebook during church, because, I think that some of the idea is that if the message of love and acceptance can get out any way that you can, do it any way you can.
Yeah.
And if that means somebody tweeting what you're saying in the middle of church, well, hey,
Well, exactly. Well, and that actually made me think of something. The advent of live tweeting. I this last weekend attended a conference about, it was confronting racism and privilege and things. And some of the most profound parts of the conference were what was happening on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were all in the room together, witnessing the same thing. Yet while we were witnessing it, engaging it there, we were also, tons of us were engaging on Twitter, and some amazing things were happening there. And what was amazing to me is the realization that we became the number 6 trending thing in the United States.
Wow.
That means other people were engaging with us too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I'm with you. By all means, if get it out, if that's what it takes, And honestly, I'm one that I feel like my own faith, my own life is very much formed around the Christian Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like at their heart, the Gospels are a message of love and acceptance. And to be honest, I feel like if you're reading them and finding anything else, I want to know what you're reading.
Right.
Because that really seems like the overwhelming message there. And if that's what it takes, like you said, Twitter or Facebook during church to get that out, by all means, please do. And I think that's just it. That's also a native language for kids these days, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas, me, who is a very tech savvy adult, I've realized that some of these 14, 15-year-olds understand it a light years better than I do.
Right.
Just because this is what they grow up doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where, having that message out there has the possibility to change somebody, has the possibility to save a life.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm tweeting the message of love, there could be a young trans person or an older trans person, for that matter, who, if I tweet something like God loves transgender people. Mm-hmm. Simple message. And, and I say, I've heard this in church. There could be a young person, trans person, or an older trans person out there who sees that message and goes, oh, wait a minute. Maybe what I'm hearing isn't right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another gay person or something,
Absolutely. Well, and that's it's funny you mentioned that. I know there's at least one trans youth that I've talked to at one point. This is not someone associated with the theater. This is someone else, a trans youth that there was a point in time, not too long ago. I don't remember what it was, but it was a Trans Lives Matter hashtag on Twitter.
Oh yeah, right.
It wasn't that long ago, and I don't remember what sparked it, but it became a big thing I think it was Leila Alcorn.
Leila Alcorn, yeah.
And the Trans Lives Matter. And I remember she told me just that seeing that Trans Lives Matter all over Twitter she's a kid that she knows her life matters. She knows that she's important. But she said that seeing that was one of those moments that, kind of helped her believe it even more. That, wow, there are actually real people out there that think this.
Yeah, and you can see them by the hundreds and thousands and millions.
I think that's the important thing. Is it's one thing to believe it yourself and to know theoretically these people are out there, but to see concrete proof of, wow. So yeah, I think that social media especially is a big factor in that. And I think that might be a big, big reason of why a lot of youth today seem to be more open and more when to talk, because they see it. They see that whatever this narrative they live in their local area is not the only thing that's there. And I think that's the other thing is social media is just given, it helps you realize what all is out there. The good and the bad, of course.
Well, yeah.
But it helps you realize just the scope of what's out there. And that maybe I don't fit right here where I am, but there's somewhere out there I do.
Right. Or that, my thoughts aren't exactly weird. Other people have had the same thoughts that I have.
Yes. Well, I mean, as a kid, wanting a family, being well aware in junior high that I was very attracted to boys. I didn't really care about girls. But knowing I want a family, I'm at heart a family guy and I want that. But I thought I was the weirdest person in the world, this wanting to, being interested in boys, wanting a family. And it would have been a major revelation to little 13, 14-year-old me to see that there are families of 2 dads and kids and that this is a thing. And that not only are they there, but they're happy and they're healthy and they're that honestly, looking at it right now, that would have been a game changer to me in so many ways, just seeing the reality that, holy crap, I'm not an insane person.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think about the early days of the internet with paganism because a lot of the Wiccan groups, really embraced the internet early on. And, it had that similar kind of effect where you went from, you meeting a random person and going, oh my God, you're pagan too? To, hey, look at all these people on the internet and they're all pagan too. And wow, I'm not really weird for thinking that. And, and I think it's kind of the same with a lot of marginalized groups. Like, oh my God, I'm not the only one.
Yes, yes. And it really, because even in my little junior high school, I know now, there were several of us that were gay, but too scared to say anything. And honestly, there's a good chance that with the internet, we may have even discovered each other there.
Right.
And realized that, oh, look, this person I literally sit next to every day is someone I can talk to. Mm-hmm. But we had no way of knowing that. And now Facebook, you can look at something and find some basic stuff like that about people in
a snap, yeah,
2 seconds. And even that, having one person there that was a safe person to talk to. Because now as an adult, I look back and I know they were there and I know who they were. But I had literally no way of knowing then. I wonder how much that might have changed things too. Just having a person.
Well, and maybe even knowing if there was a safe adult to talk to. Mm-hmm. I think that's been a really big thing. I make it very well known that I'm a safe adult to talk to about these things.
Yes.
And, and I think that's important for people younger than me is that, oh, wait a minute, there are adults now that say, oh, look, if you need to talk to me, just email me.
Yes. Well, and that's actually one of the big reasons I'm involved with the youth theater with youth in my church and things is because just that I realized that a safe adult, whether in the church or not, but a safe adult to have talked to would have changed so much in my life. And it's another one of those things I look back and I realize that I know now there are a few adults in my life that would have been safe adults to talk to, but I didn't know they were safe adults to talk to. That's, like you said, making it well known that you can talk to me. There is not an off limit topic.
Right.
Please come talk. It is safe. Because the safe adults that I knew growing up, I didn't know they were safe places because it wasn't well known. And I'm not really sure. I don't blame them. I'm not sure they had a way to make it well known and without losing the positions they were in.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. I think maybe internet and social media has made it a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, not that there's not dangers even in that, because there's still areas, even I mean, there's still areas even in the Bay Area. I mean, I live in like the liberal hub, the liberal bastion.
Oh yeah.
But even here, it was just recently that the Bishop of San Francisco for the Catholic Church basically was forcing people in the Catholic schools around here to sign morality contracts. And, and that just really hurts the safe environment for kids.
It does. And yeah, you're right. There are definitely still risks. But one example is one of these people that was a safe adult growing up was a guy who was my pastor for several years. Growing up in my super conservative church, it honestly, even as an adult, shocked me that I had a pastor that was a safe place, that I wish I had known that. The only way I know now, though, he's still a pastor in this very conservative church denomination. And he's intentionally choosing to stay there because kids need a safe voice. But the way I know now is through a private Facebook message. He doesn't advertise it, but he has a way to reach out and say, you know what? Hey,
come talk to me.
And that's a way it didn't exist when I was a teenager. So he couldn't do something like that. But yeah, I think even though you're right, there's still danger because he's definitely one of the people in a place that it's sad to say, but if it were to get out, he could lose his positions and probably would. Mm-hmm. But I admire what he's doing and staying there and making himself intentionally. I'm staying here because there has to be a safe voice here.
Right. I
love that, honestly. And I applaud people with that kind of courage and conviction.
And that's amazing because, we're giving voice to people who need it, but also giving voice to those who are trying to be safe spaces and can't be very public about it. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I talk about a lot is, everything you do is helping, everything anybody can do, even if it's a small thing. Yeah. And, if that's how that person does their ministry, it's a small thing, but it's helping. It's changing the paradigm.
It's a small thing, but it's a big small thing, if that makes any sense.
Exactly.
And it has the potential to be huge. Because it's like we said earlier, that one word from that one person can change the world. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's very possible that he in this place where he has to be very quiet about it has the possibility of being that one voice that changes the world for one person and possibly even creates that one person who can go on to truly change the world.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. I guess I'm a firm believer in that there's nothing too small. Mm-hmm. Like you said, everything you do helps, and it really does matter, no matter how big it is, mm-hmm. small it is.
Yeah. And I hope eventually we can really change the paradigm in any circle, because, there is a problem in progressive circles, and, we've seen it with some of the posts through PCA. We've seen it. I've seen it in just about every progressive group that I've been in. There's that paradigm is if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then you're not really helping the situation. And it's just kind of like, we need to flip that paradigm and be like, everything you do helps. Mm-hmm. From the person that makes you a sandwich at a rally,
Exactly. Well, it's you say that, it's almost like I've realized that even in progressive circles, there's a form of fundamentalism that arises. Mm-hmm. Like you have to check off the right boxes to actually be here.
Yeah.
And it is exactly just that, a form of fundamentalism that starts to grow. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Everyone matters. Like one thing that just I loved and that honestly made me a little teary. I'm a emotional basket case. I cry at the slightest little thing.
That's all right.
Some of these images that have come out of the Baltimore area have been just truly heartbreaking. But there's one image I saw that just made me smile, and just it showed the cops in there, right? You're standing with their mm-hmm. and there's this little kid just giving water, to cops and to other people there. I was just like, huh. And to me, that was that kid that was doing what he could to make it a better place in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love things like that.
Yeah.
Because in some places, honestly, I'd argue in some ways the little things matter more.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's little acts of compassion that can have a really huge impact.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, and that kid, that picture, I don't even know who that kid was, but that picture, thousands, maybe even millions of people see that picture too. And so it's the little impact that impacted those people. It's also what he did impact others who see it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little tiny act. But yeah, it really does. I mean, I always go back to, in the Bible, one of the messages Jesus has in the gospel is, the faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. I'm one that I take that a step further. I look at that picture as, not just the faith of a mustard seed in like religious settings, but, I take that to mean, there literally is nothing that's too small.
Mm-hmm.
Because mustard seeds are the tiniest thing. They're so little tiny, but they become this huge thing. And so, even the tiniest act of kindness, that little mustard seed act, has that potential to change everything.
Yeah. So,
and part of me wonders, I guess something that I spend a lot of time thinking about is, what would the world be like? Legitimately, what would the world be like if one of us made a point of doing that little mustard seed act of kindness every day?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's something that wouldn't take a lot of effort for any of us to do.
Right.
How much would it change the world if every one of us made it intentional to do that one thing every day?
Yeah, I gave a sermon about the parable of the mustard seed for the spring equinox, or Ostara. And it was at a time where, the church, my church, was moving to a different venue. And one of the things I also added in, because, I'm a biochemist. I took botany for a while. I almost minored in botany. And one of the things I reminded people is that the smallest seeds can even break rocks. If an acorn lands on a rock and it has enough water and light and nourishment to grow, it can break that rock over time.
Wow.
And I think a lot of those little mustard seeds are now starting to break the big rock of our society that has stayed.
I really like the way you just said that, and it made me start thinking of an image myself that I may ultimately use in a sermon myself even. But that, even a seed that looks like it's wasted, if nourished and watered enough, will grow. And there's nothing you can really do to stop it. Mm-mm. And that's actually kind of a really powerful thought. That there is just that no wasted action, no wasted act of kindness or compassion. Because I guess that's one of those things that just drives me crazy. I hear it sometimes, is that, well, why would you do that? It's not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. Like, well, I'm not doing it to do anything. I'm doing it because it's a good thing to do. And I'm sure you've heard that type of reasoning before. You do a kind act. Well, they're just going to waste that. And like, okay.
Well, they say that about a lot of things too. Like, I'm starting to get into my local city politics, and it's like, well, there's the whole voter apathy thing. It's like, why would I bother to vote? Why wait? My little voice doesn't count. I'm like, every little thing counts.
Yes. Something I heard in a sermon recently that I've also seen online since was, tell the man, what was it? Tell the man stuck in a sleeping bag with a mosquito that a small thing doesn't count.
Right.
It's like, I was like, well, you have a point. Mm-hmm. You will know that little mosquito's there. And you look through history. History is full of examples where one voice changed everything. It's usually not one voice alone, but one voice that stands up and ultimately says, you know what? It's got to change.
Yeah.
And we look at our own history, like people like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. These are solitary voices among many others, mm-hmm. but solitary voices that really said something and that clearly mattered. We remember them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got Malcolm X, you've got what's his name? Oh, Mumia. I can't think of his name. But there's a person on death row who writes a lot about our prison system and how our system is messed up. There's lots of people. And then, there's even young people now, like the whole movement in Ferguson, a lot of that movement was started by two queer women.
Exactly.
Of color.
Exactly.
And, there's small voices in a big sea, but, they kept alive something that shouldn't die.
Yes. I know small voices matter. A small voice I think about is Edith Windsor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one person, but honestly, without her doing the things she did and pushing, I honestly doubt that we'd have things coming to, we wouldn't have had the Supreme Court arguments yesterday.
Yep.
We wouldn't have the Supreme Court making a decision it's in June. I mean, I'll be honest, part of me is a little terrified about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that we're here is because, honestly, of a series of individual voices that have gotten us, each voice has gotten us one step closer and one step closer. I think that's the other thing that I actually was just having this conversation earlier today with someone who said, I have this vision and I can just see it. And she was getting so hard on herself because I can see this vision, but we're not getting there. And I reminded her, I'm taking an Old Testament class at seminary, so I'm very entrenched in Old Testament.
Right.
But I told her, I said, something that I think about is, the Israelites in the desert, they could see the promised land. It took them 2 generations to get there. And just that reminder of, it's good that you have this vision and you can see it. Just because we're not there yet doesn't mean anything. Every step, no matter how small, no matter how frustratingly small sometimes, it matters. Mm-hmm. I think that's something I've seen in the whole LGBT marriage equality debate, is there have been some things and people are like, that's not far enough. And people get angry. And I agree, it's not far enough, but it's further than we were just a few minutes ago.
Right. Exactly. And you also need the people to talk about the vision.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
The people have to keep talking about the vision, saying, yes, this is not far enough. This is where we could go.
Yes. And I think that both are important, because the problem is, if you just focus on the vision, you eventually burn out because you're not there. Right. You got to focus on the small steps, the small victories, but don't celebrate too much the small victories so that you forget the vision. Mm-hmm. It's a delicate balancing act sometimes. Right.
And to really look at what we've done in a very short amount of time. Oh, yeah. I mean, would you think 5 years ago that a trans woman of color would be a very prominent spokesperson and actress?
No, I actually saw that the other day, a picture of her. I'm assuming you're talking about
Laverne Cox. Yeah.
Laverne Cox, yeah. I saw an image of her and I just thought, wow, she's a beautiful person, Mm-hmm. She's a gorgeous woman, I think, and intelligent. And it dawned on me at that moment, not even 5 years ago, just realizing that even like 2 years ago, if you had told me that she would be where she is, I probably would have told you were insane.
Yeah.
Not because I wouldn't want her to be where she was, but because I honestly wouldn't have believed it was possible.
Right.
And so, people like her that do the impossible just inspire me.
Well, I mean, think about even 10 years ago, gay marriage alone. The gay marriage thing alone. 10 years ago was how many states that had gay marriage? Very little.
2?
3, maybe.
3?
2.
Okay.
3. Yeah.
There's 2 or 3. It wasn't many, though. I know.
Right. And then.
And even within the LGBT community, honestly, I remember 10 years ago that talking about marriage equality was not something that was talked about. It was let's at least get civil unions. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the conversation in a lot of places, at least where I was. That was the conversation. We weren't talking about marriage. We were talking about, can we at least get scraps from the table?
Right. And forget trans issues, right?
Exactly. But yeah, it really is astounding. And all of that, I would like to remind people, happened because people did something. And they said something. And if you really look at it, there have not been many dramatically huge individual people that have done huge things. It's all been all normal, everyday people who've done small things that have added up to being huge things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of my biggest things I talk to with youth, with my own children, when I talk to them, is that, you matter. Your ideas matter. Your thoughts matter. Don't ever think that your thoughts and your words and your ideas aren't good enough. Because, I actually told my daughter recently, my daughter is one that gets very self-conscious, and she's afraid to say what she's thinking because she's afraid people will think it's dumb, or she's 9. She was talking to me all about, who was it? A big woman, and I think it was like Susan B. Anthony or someone like that, a woman who pioneered some women's rights type thing. I can't remember who it was right now, but who refused to sit down and shut up, basically. And when she was told to, and she was told to frequently, her response was always, no, I won't. Right. My daughter's always afraid to speak for herself. And I asked her, because she was all excited telling me about this. And I said, imagine for just a minute what it would be like if she had decided that what she had to say wasn't worth it. I said, what would it be like if she decided that, what, these people are telling me to shut up, I probably should. And she started to say, well, this wouldn't have happened, and this wouldn't have happened. And it's like you see all a light bulb go off on her head, and like, oh. It's like literally if that one single woman, had not said what she said, not to say women would never get to where they were, but some of the significant strides that were made just because she refused to sit down and submit wouldn't have been made then. Mm-hmm. And you just saw this ding moment, and she's like, oh. And I told her, I said, your thoughts matter just as much. And that's what I try to get youth, especially, to understand. You matter. Don't let someone tell you otherwise. And if they do, make sure you shut them up and tell them that, no, you really are wrong, and I do matter. Mm-hmm. That I think is my biggest message, not just for youth, for people, because there's so many adults that need to understand that too. Mm-hmm. It's like you mentioned that, why would you bother voting? Why would you bother? Well, why wouldn't you? Mm-hmm.
But, I think in addition to that, we have to say, but if you don't feel like standing up, that's okay too.
It is. It really is.
If you physically feel you're in danger, if you physically feel you can't, if you emotionally feel that you can't, you are also allowed to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's an important thing to be reminded of. I guess to me, it's a different thing, that you are allowed to take care of yourself. You are allowed to, if you don't feel like you can do this, to not. But I think it's another thing altogether to believe that I'm not worth doing it.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. Like, if you can truly own that, yes, what I say matters. Yes, what I say does matter. But you know what? I can't wade into this. I can't do this. I think it's a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. Because, there's so many people that I've heard it said before that I really wish I could say something on X topic. I want to ask people, well, why can't you? Like, people who legitimately want to, mm-hmm. but don't believe they have anything valid to offer.
Right.
I think altogether different thing. But yeah, there are people, though, that are thrust out there and really need to hear exactly what you said. It's okay to take care of you, to sit back and not do this.
Right. And, and to also know that and like we were talking before, it's even the little things help. If you have a friend of yours who's really into politics, really into activism, making them dinner one night so they can go and do their activism is a big deal.
It is. It really is.
Sending $5 to the candidate of your choice actually mm-hmm. adds up if 100 million people send $5, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think about something little that actually happened with me just the other day. I was in Chicago, and there was a gentleman that I passed on the way to the conference I was at, standing next to a bakery, and I was going to go in and get me something for breakfast. And I grabbed the door, and he told me, and they open at 7. They're not open yet. There's another 15 minutes. So I just kept going. I said, okay, thank you. Have a great day. Came back by, and the gentleman was still there. This is about an hour later. He said, "They're open now. You can go in." And I just saw him, and I said, "Yeah." And we just struck up a conversation. It turned out he shared with me that he had just lost his home, like a few days before. And I asked him, "Are you waiting for someone here? What's going on? Are you?" Basically asked him why he's there. And he said he was just standing there because it was a good place to meet people. He wasn't doing it for any real reason other than to meet people. And I asked him if he had anything to eat that day, and he said no. And so I asked him if he liked this place, and he said, "Yeah, this is where he used to come a lot." And so I gave him $5 to go in and get whatever he wanted. And I wasn't doing it to be a hero or anything. That just because that seemed like I have it. Why not? Mm-hmm. And to me, though, you could see on his face that little bitty thing, he wasn't looking for things. He wasn't asking for things, but that changed his whole day. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing moment when you realize that even the little things you do matter.
Yeah.
They really do. And it doesn't have to be something like that. Like you said, making a meal for someone to go be an activist, do their thing. Just the little things. And I guess that's a message that I wish that more people could understand. That you don't have to do the big things to matter. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I know that's one of the things that I try to, I guess, preach about. I guess I'm a reluctant preacher, but, I try to, and I find it creeps into a lot of the podcasts that I do, this idea that, the little things matter and just how much people are grateful for any help, even if they're, if they're activists, if they're well-known activists, even the little things are important.
Absolutely.
And I find that
sometimes those little things, like I said before, are more important than the big things could ever be. Mm-hmm. Because, without the little things, without a meal, you're not going very far. Right. It's the reality.
Yeah. Or even just the support of a good friend or your spouse, or, it's very important to me that my spouse, my wife, Sarah, is very supportive of my ministry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's actually something I talked about with my husband when I decided, I'm going to do this. This is where I'm going, doing these ministry things. We actually sat down and had a conversation, and I told him, "You're probably going to think I'm crazy." Mm-hmm. I said, "I half think I'm crazy right now, but here's what I want to do." And he's like, I remember him. So you want to quit your job and you want to go into place that we really don't know where you're going or why you're doing or how you're going to do it, but you want to go do it. I'm like, that pretty much sums it up. I remember he literally, it was something that I told him, "I need your support to do this, though. I won't do it if you're not on board with this." And so, I get that. And his support's been invaluable too. I wouldn't have been able to make it without his support. I think that's something that's so true. I'm realizing that, in seminary a lot and in just talks with other colleagues in Christianity and other faiths, we talk a lot about faith communities. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing that that's common language in just about every faith. Because you really need that. You need that community. You can't do it alone. And that's not just faith. Mm-hmm. I think legitimately life, we're not made to do it alone. Mm-hmm. And so, I think you're right that support is invaluable when you know that even if it's just a good friend that has my back, I'm not alone. Because inevitably, even the most driven person is going to run out of steam when trying to go alone.
Absolutely.
And it's just not how we're made, not how we're designed.
Yeah.
I get I know I get disheartened myself sometimes in my ministry and in my life. Sometimes I'm unable to see the good things that are happening and instead focus on the negative things. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm horrible at that.
I hear you.
I will let the bad things get me so down. And then thankfully I have friends and colleagues who will point out to me, it's like, but you're not looking at this or this or this or this or this or this. Mm-hmm. And they leave this laundry list of things that are amazing things. that somehow I've managed to let drop off my radar to focus on, the two bad things. And I realized that without those friends and colleagues, that I wouldn't be able to do these things that I'm doing.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't, because it would just the negatives would kill me.
Yep.
So that's why I'm grateful for, again, like the PCA and the connection it gives and the ability to just instantly shoot a message or email to someone and be like, hey, I need some support right now.
Right.
Here's what's happening. Even if it's just a, hey, I'm thinking about you. That's still helpful sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I actually know I sent you one time when we first connected on Facebook. I sent you a message basically saying I thought that what you were doing was amazing, because I really did. I remember your message. It was 2 days later. You sent a message back and you said, that is what I needed to hear right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's amazing how much those little things can truly change us.
And it's really funny, like they usually come at the right time. And, I chalk that up to, the spirits doing what they do best.
Yes. As one of my pastor friends, she's an Episcopal priest. She said, God, Mother, Divine Spirit, whatever you want to call them, keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
That's her. She's hilarious to me because she's very she's one that taught me more than anyone else to what it means when we talk about the Holy Spirit, the Divine Spirit, whatever you want to call it. That she's the one that really helped me to learn that this is a real thing and it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So and then I learned, like you, to chalk it up to them knowing what they're doing or whatever it is. So.
Or, even if you don't believe in deity or whatever, it's just the universe doing what it does best.
Oh, exactly. I guess it's my thing that when I say it's a real thing, to me, it's this holy divine spirit is very much a real thing. And I've got, but yeah, even if you don't believe in a deity, the universe is an amazing place and it does go take care of us.
Mm-hmm. And I think, humanity isn't as horrible, I think, as people can see it sometimes. Because, we have a media that's very good at looking at the negative and thinking that it's more interesting. But I think...
Look at the Baltimore riots to see that. I mean...
Right.
There's a lot of good parts that the media's completely ignored.
Yeah, like the first 6 days of peaceful protest?
Or the March of the Clergy.
Mm-hmm.
That was a wonderfully powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. And that's another place that we talked about social media. I'm thankful for social media because social media, I've actually been quite proud of people in general because social media seems to be not okay with just laying down. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, I've seen a lot of, hey, this is happening too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been nice to see that really people are refusing to let the media shape that narrative and saying, look.
And I think it's been good because, we get to see all of us now instead of what we're being told we should see.
Yes. And I'm actually, I'll be honest, I'm a person that I'm hopeful that social media and the fact that, I can whip out my cell phone and take a video and post it online, and there's a good chance the whole world will see that video and see what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
That encourages me and it makes me hope that eventually one day this media that manufactures things will be no more.
Right. Or will change.
Like, honestly, I've been happy to see a fairly positive story going around the last few days about the mother who went and pulled her kid out of the riots. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yep.
And the news has been actually focusing on a mother saving her kid.
Mm-hmm.
That's been refreshing.
Yeah. I mean, wow, what a miracle, right?
I know.
Hallelujah.
When I realized that was news media reporting this, I'm like, wow. Mm-hmm. So, and I said, go mom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately, I think that all of these interconnected things can only be better for us as a whole, as a society, making us realize more and more that, like we've said before, like we said earlier, that we're not alone. And that even when we're different, I think one thing that social media has shown me so well is that sometimes the people who seem the most different from me really aren't that different at all once I start to get to know them on a human level. And I think that's one of my hopes for this coming generation, that they'll see more and more that these issues of race and sexuality and other things, at our heart, we're human. And that's what matters. And I think it's getting there. It's not there yet. We got a ways to go. Mm-hmm. But I'm hopeful for this next generation that it'll continue down that road. Because that's one big thing I see with my youth, that especially when it comes to distinctions of race and gender, they just don't get it. They legitimately don't get the issue, which I am thankful for.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Because we were actually having that conversation a little while back, and one of the girls said, "I'm sorry." She said, "I just don't get it. What's the point?" I was like, I love that you just asked that question, because the fact that she legitimately didn't understand was hopeful to me. That maybe we're not that far from breaking through some of these things that have held us down for centuries, honestly.
Mm. Well, I hope so too. And on that note, we're just about out of time. This is all right. Sometimes, we get to gabbing and it's all good.
I hear you.
If people wanted to get in touch with you to learn more about you, or to ask you questions, or to learn about your ministry, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
The best way would probably actually be email. I check my email a million times a day. So, okay, it's Fred-Allen.self, Fred-Allen.self, SELF, at outlook.com. Sorry, it's a convoluted
That's okay.
email. That, or a much simpler email, which is dadself, DADSELF, at gmail.com. Those are the two quickest ways to get in touch with me. And if you email me, I will respond. I respond to any email to someone because I love talking to people and I love getting to know people.
Excellent. So, well, we'll put those in the show notes. And so thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I love it. I love talking to you. I love listening. So
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Fred-Allen for joining us this week. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. You can support This Week in Heresy by subscribing to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, following us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast, or financially through Patreon. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.